What's up everybody, welcome back to the channel and to another Outriders video. Today we're looking at the Trickster, more specifically Firepower / Twisted Rounds Trickster, which is probably in the best place it's ever been due to some small changes that they've made with the New Horizon patch, but just overall how the class comes together. I was really impressed by this. It deals a beast load of damage and I'd definitely just like to share that with you today. So if you find this video useful in any way or enjoy it, do consider giving the video a like, subscribing to the channel, maybe sharing it with a buddy. It really does help the channel grow a lot and it just means a whole lot to me. But without any further ado, let's jump right in. Now, using the footage in the background as a basis for the next couple of points I want to make, I would say that the reason why Trickster is in such a good place right now is, first of all, of course, the fact that we have this additional change that was made to the Trespasser set. So originally the Trespasser set basically said that, characters inside Slow Trap can't die. Now that was the only buff that the set had, and that was pretty poor, to be honest. What they've done with the New Horizon patches, they've actually included one additional line here, which is really the game changer, and that is that increases damage by 6% per enemy affected by a deception skill. Now, deception skills are of course Time Rift, Slow Trap, and Venator's Knife. So while in this build here I use Time Rift, Venator's Knife is also an option. I haven't experimented with Slow Trap all that much, and I don't really think it'll be that fantastic. But what really makes this shine here is due to the other mods that you can stack on Time Rift, and that just allows you to deal a whole bunch of damage to not just one character or two at a time, but entire groups. Now, that combined to the fact that the Trickster's playstyle, especially Firepower Trickster, is usually this sort of like all or nothing kind of approach where you wait until your cooldowns are ready and then you just jump in and you dump a whole bunch of damage, you throw your Time Rift, and then essentially, you try to balance out your bullets as much as you can using a jump to refresh your bullets, or once you run out of creatures to kill. Now that's still basically the way how you play this, but personally, for me, one of the reasons why this just feels a lot better now is that the additional time pressure that was there is now not there anymore. So you aren't sort of forced into this, like, as soon as your abilities come off cooldown, having to use it to just push and go as fast as possible. But you can rather choose your engagements right now and kind of line up stuff in the right way to hit as many as possible with the Time Rift. And of course, the added benefit to that is just this additional damage that you get, which has no cap, by the way. So if you hit 10 enemies, that is 60% additional damage that you're basically getting from it. If you hit 20 enemies, that's 120% extra damage. Now, I don't think you'll have many opportunities to hit, 20 enemies, but that's not really the point, is it? The fact of the matter is that this class hits like a Mack truck once you start offloading all your damage onto it, especially with the way how it scales with your standard firepower mods on the armor, which we'll be looking at, of course. And more importantly, once you start playing this in a multiplayer situation where you aren't the focal point of enemies trying to pin you down and maybe something's up front, that's really where Trickster starts shining, because you can really position yourself in great ways on the battlefield. So you can use your Time Rift most optimally, but you can also basically perform hit and run tactics by jumping in behind stuff, thereby engaging your combo, knocking down a whole bunch of stuff, and as soon as it comes off cooldown, you jump out. Cooldowns feature very importantly in this build due to the fact that they're so incredibly low, so you'll never have to wait for either a Time Rift or a jump to come available. And of course, by jump, by the way, I'm talking about hunt to prey, so I hope that that's clear. But definitely this is super impressive, and even though I don't play Trickster a lot, people have been coming into the streams using this build, and this is my version of that build, and the testing that I've done with it is just super awesome. So when we get to the actual build itself, I have been goofing around with two different weapons. Well, actually, I've been using one main weapon and then trying out something else. Now, naturally, this build is suited by using a shotgun, more specifically an automatic shotgun that shoots really fast, because you want to be chewing through bullets as fast as possible to engage the maximum amount of buffs that you can get from your mods on your armor. But more specifically, it's also just a great way for you to trigger your fortress, which is also a very good additional mod to have in this build, due to the fact that you get resistances in terms of damage, mitigation for that matter, and you get the additional damage. And since you'll mostly be shooting in any case, it's a no-brainer, and you'll be engaging this buff a lot. An incredibly good foot is of course the Death Shield, because it comes with Fortress by default, and that allows you to put something like Dark Sacrifice on there, which just further on ramps up your weapon damage exponentially. The other weapon, as I was referring to at the beginning, that I've been goofing around a little bit with now, bear in mind this of course has transmog on, but is in actual fact a Fatal Symbiont. The Fatal Symbiont is the opposite side. This actually has Dark Sacrifice on by default, and here I've been goofing around with using Ultimate Damage Link instead of Fortress, and kind of seeing if that works better in a situation where there's more smaller enemies and less bigger ones, you know, something like that. Plus, the other thing is, whenever you do fight stuff at, let's say, a little bit of a longer range, it is useful to be able to have something that has got slightly more range than, for instance, the Death Shield. But nonetheless, if you're only going for one weapon, and most people will only be going for one weapon, then definitely the Death Shield is your best fit for sure. So a high roll Death Shield with Fortress and Dark Sacrifice on is the way to go. When we get to the actual armor pieces, of course, we're using the Trespasser set. So the Trespasser set, the three pieces that you want to be using is you want to be using the headgear, you want to be using the gloves, and you want to be using the footgear. That leaves two purple pieces open for you. And the point is, of course, you want to be stacking as much bonus firepower as you can. Your next important stat is close range damage, and the next important stat after that is cooldown reduction. Kind of, I would almost say that cooldown reduction and close range damage are equally important for this build, but if you have to choose between one of those two, most likely close range damage is your best bet, due to the fact that you just want to be pushing out as much damage as possible, and stuff that's dead can kill you back. So on the first item here, which is our headgear from the Trespasser's Call, we've got Sharp Eye on here, and we've got long range. Now Sharp Eye is, I think, a no-brainer. Anybody that plays bullet based you know, builds, especially, you know, a techno, something like that, this is staple on a techno. And this just means that when you fire down sights, which you'll be doing a lot in any case, then you'll be stacking additional firepower on top, which ramps up your damage. Long range on here is so that you triple the range of Time Rift. Now Time Rift by itself, it's always difficult to gauge meters in this game, but I think Time Rift probably goes somewhere between 4 and 6 meters, which is really not a lot. This essentially punches it out to 18 meters, and that means that you can actually line down, if monsters are coming running at you down a corridor, you can angle it in such a way that you can literally hit them all with one Time Rift, which is fantastic, and that's going to ramp up your damage with the set bonus from Trespasser. When we get to the chest piece, yeah, we've got Geiger's Wave. Now, as I said, where this build really shines is all of the mods that you stack on top of Time Rift, which makes Time Rift just such a clutch skill. Now, Time Rift itself, this says that whenever you hit something with Time Rift, now by the way, once we get to the skills, you'll see that Time Rift already causes weakness on enemies. Now this also just gives them vulnerable as well. So not only are they dealing less damage at you, and that's when they're, you know, hanging in the air or not, but they're also now vulnerable, which means they are taking more damage as well. Your second skill on here is Ammo Bargain, and there are two reload mechanics at work here, or mechanisms if you want, for you to get your bullets back and keep your twisted rounds up. Now, Ammo Bargain is one of them. This basically says that whenever you kill something, you get 20% of your mag back. This is essential, and this is a great way for you to keep your bullets up, obviously, when you're mopping up trash. Now, when we get over to the pants, here's another great firepower based skill, and that's Bloodlust. This is, you know, basically runs hand in hand with Sharp Eye. The only difference between Sharp Eye and Bloodlust is that with Bloodlust you don't have to be looking down the barrel, so you'll even get the Bloodlust stacks if you just shoot from, you know, the hip. You just have to kill stuff and then you get the buff. Next, we have my one defensive ability on this build. Now, two reasons why I have this on here, or let's rather than say two things that you should bear in mind whether you want to run Damage Absorber or not. So first things first, the build is kind of squishy, and yes, Trickster is ridiculously good at cycling up life, because remember the point of Trickster and how Trickster's, you know, passive works is that by dealing damage to stuff in close range, you're not only getting, you know, life back, but you're also getting shield. So you can, as long as you're in a fight and as long as you keep going, you can, you know, keep yourself topped up. The problem that you have with Trickster is if you get locked down by something, if you get frozen, if you get stuck in blue fire, you know, anything like that for any given time, and you're not fighting, you're not dealing damage, then you can very easily die. So I really enjoy the fact that Damage Absorber just gives me this additional armor, which gives me, you know, physical damage mitigation, but it also gives me the 10% resistance, which is good. The other thing is that I usually play solo. I would say 75 to 85% of the time in this game I'm playing solo, and the rest of the time I play with people. And of course, when I stream, I play with people that I carry through. Now, I think if you play this build solo, I think it's more important for you to have damage mitigation. Whereas if you play this multiplayer a lot, and especially once you start learning the nuance of the character, then you don't really need a defensive ability, because like I said, these hit and run tactics and poking and then jumping out when, you know, the shit hits the fan will be enough defense for you. But nonetheless, that's the one defensive mod that I have on the build. When we go over to the gloves, that's our second piece of Trespasser. Yeah, I have pain transfer. Now this is a phenomenal mod with time rift, and basically it's like ultimate, you know, like what we had on the gun over here, which is ultimate damage link. This is a mod version of that for armor that says 20% of damage and 30% of anomaly damage dealt to one affected enemy will be transferred to another affected enemy. Now here's the thing, when you hit 12 enemies with a time rift, all the when you deal damage to one of those 12, it cascades down to everything else that's within that, you know, time rift. So by a lot of the time when you time rift something, it's really super smart for you to pick out the strongest enemy out of the bunch of stuff that's hanging in the air and put all your damage into that. Because not only will you most likely kill that, but because you're dealing so much damage to that big enemy, it'll cascade the damage down to the smaller ones and most likely give them as well. On here, we also have our second reload mechanism, and that's instant reload coming on Hunt to Prey. This means that every time when you use Hunt to Prey and jump in behind something, you get a full clip. So by leveraging these two off each other, you can essentially always make sure that you keep your bullets up. One of the super fun things with this build is learning sort of the nuance, as I've mentioned, of how to play this, where you could be fighting a big enemy that needs like quite a bit of damage or quite a bit of bullets to down it, so you can shoot until you're almost empty in your mag, and then you jump off onto a weak enemy, quickly kill it with one bullet, which means you've got now a full mag again, plus you've just topped yourself up with 20% because you killed the small one, and that means you have a brand new full mag that you can use on this big mob. Of course, you can also just shoot the big enemy, and then as soon as your gun is almost empty, just jump in behind it, get a full mag and shoot it in the back. That's fully possible as well. But I do like the fact that you can dart in between enemies like this, and it really does not only give you a lot of options in terms of where you engage from, but also options for escape. Like if you're fighting and suddenly you find yourself standing in Broodmother Blue Fire, you can use the Hunt to Prey to jump out onto somewhere where there isn't any danger, plus you get a full mag to boot and you can go to work. When we go over to the boots and our third piece of Trespasser, here we use Stare into the Barrel. Stare into the Barrel is another way for us to increase our firepower. Now, all of your engagement will most likely be in close range, especially because you'll be jumping in behind stuff, or you'll be time rifting them up and sort of like running in underneath them and shooting them. Stare into the Barrel is fantastic because it boosts your firepower for each enemy that's in close range. So if you jump into a cluster of 5 or 6 enemies, you're gonna get like 5 times that amount there. It stacks up to 5, unfortunately, that's the maximum, but that's an extra 50k firepower, which is ridiculous. The second one on here is Personal Space, which is a mod that's specifically geared for being able to fight in close range, and this just says that you deal 25% bonus damage to, or rather let me rephrase that, your close range weapon damage is increased by 25. It's not quite as good as what I was saying just now, but yeah, it increases the close range damage, which you've already been stacking on all of your items, just by a further 25%. Now when we move over to the skills, I think it's clear by now which skills we're using, but of course we're using Twisted Rounds. We're using Time Rift. Time Rift is, as I've mentioned, pop stuff up for 3.5 seconds and gives them weakness, but due to the fact that we've modded Vulnerable into it as well, that with Geiger Wave, that just really weakens whatever you hit with the Time Rift. You'll also notice that it's on a super low cooldown of 6.4 seconds, so you can literally farm one of these out every 7 seconds. And then of course Hunt to Prey, that's our main escape ability, but also a reload mechanism, as I've mentioned. And this deals gives you a small amount of shield when you jump in behind stuff. Usually, I guess it's about 1/4 to almost 1/3. But the main point here is you jump in behind something and you get a full reload out of it due to the fact that we modded for that. That's also on a ridiculously low cooldown of 4.8 seconds. So these two combined means that within a 10-second spread, you can cause quite a bit of confusion and damage to your enemies. Now, one of the other things that I really like about this build as well is that even if you lose bullets, and when you're learning to play this, It can happen, especially if you're playing in multiplayer. You can overreach and you might not have enemies nearby that you can reload off of, or you don't get the final killing blow, so you don't get your 20% bullets back, or more specifically, there's not an enemy you can jump onto to get the instant reload. So you might lose bullets. Even then, due to the other ramp up mechanics that we have with damage and mods on this class, you're still going to be dealing a shitload of damage just with a normal death shield not being ramped up by twisted rounds. But the cooldown on twisted rounds is so super low at 16 seconds basically, that the longest you could be out of damage is 16 seconds, and then you're right back at it. So it really is no big deal. The only other alternative I would say is if you find yourself losing bullets a lot, then and you're playing multiplayer a lot, then perhaps a good idea would be to replace damage absorber with the mod that gives you a second clip of twisted rounds when the first one runs out. That way you basically make sure that you almost never run out of bullets. Last but not least, let's definitely go over to the class tree. Now, I just want to mention on the screen here, you'll notice, like, when it comes to the end of the tree by assassin, you'll notice that my, lovely face is obscuring it a little bit there. But the point is, the nodes which you can see on screen here are the ones you should pick. There's the one that's hidden by my my mug is Assault Adept, and that one you don't need. That one is grayed out. So nonetheless, let's quickly walk through here. So as I've mentioned, something to always bear in mind is that with Trickster, you're expected to fight stuff in close range, and that's why we're stacking so much stuff into close range, because to get the maximum benefit from the, let's say, healing mechanic that the class is built by, you have to be fighting in close range, because that's the only way that you get yourself, shield and health. Okay, so as we go down here, we're just picking up close range weapon damage, we're picking up armor piercing. The first big one we pick up is Shotgun Master. Now that's why I said that the shotgun is a natural fit for the Trickster and for this build, and that's not just because it's close range, but it's also because it's being boosted up by this node. The next important one that we have to get is Disruptive Firepower. This says that whenever you activate a deception skill, you get 35% additional weapon damage for 8 seconds. Now that's huge. That means every 6.4 seconds you can give yourself this damage boost, and the damage boost lasts for 8 seconds. So by just always hitting Time Rift on its cooldown, you essentially always make sure that you deal 35% additional weapon damage, which is ridiculous. When we go down over here, we have Outrider Executioner. This is activating movement skills increases your weapon damage by 35% as well. That means that when you hit Time Rift and you then immediately hunt the prey, you have 70% additional weapon damage, which is ridiculous. So that is by far the most damage you can put down on someone. Like if you hit a brood mother or something like that and is in amongst a bunch of enemies with a Time Rift, now you're already getting all the +6s from Trespasser, and then you hunt the prey onto that brood mother and you shoot her in her back, you will down her before you run out of your mag. In fact, you'll probably use half a mag to do it. It's ridiculous. We're just moving through the tree here as usual. This actually is a very great one as well. I mean, you have to pick it up, but you deal additional damage to enemies from behind them. Again, in multiplayer, this just really shines if other characters are taking sort of like the aggro and the heat off you. Then we do pick up Equilibrium here, but we don't pick up Transfusion. We don't need the additional weapon leech. You'll be chewing through stuff so fast with this. It's like basically a blender, so you're not going to be dealing with any issues of running out of life. Especially, again, like any character, it might feel a little bit weird when you're playing it at the beginning, but once you get good at this, you are virtually unkillable while being like the most damage dealing character on the field. Now, we do also want to be picking up Bounty Hunter, which gives you additional 50% weapon damage to elites. That's 15, not 50. Sorry for my pronunciation. Oddity Summation is great because it doubles your mag by 50%. So that means that essentially instead of having 7 or 8 bullets, I think it's 7 with Death Shield, you have 14 or 15. I think you have 15. I don't know why I'm not remembering this now, but I'm pretty sure it's 15. Then when we go over here, we pick up Shotgun Adept, which is of course additional damage with a shotgun. Again, just making sure that you're using a shotgun. And then last but not least, Cold Calculation is ridiculous as well, because for each enemy in close range, your weapon damage is increased by 8%. So there's another additive ability that increases your close range damage, or rather your weapon damage based on the fact of enemies being in close range. It's important to understand the difference between those two, and I really do apologize that I kind of like speak over myself there, but it's important to understand that there's two different things here. There's weapon damage, but then there's also something like close range damage, and those two actually are additive to each other, and that gives you your character's overall damage. Just in case I needed to clear that up. That's it for the build, guys. Let me know in the comments down below if you've built something like this, if you're playing with this, what your experience is with it, and if you think it's the best version of Trickster that we have available right now, or maybe you have something else and you can give me something to look at. However, I can tell you that on the weekend while streaming, I ran with some other players, shout out to William, that was running this, and he was dealing upwards of 400 million in a co-op, which was ridiculous. This chews through stuff as soon as you start to sort of get the nuance of how to play this. And I think it's a very unique play style. So if you do like this sort of like ninja striking from the darkness kind of situation, this is 150% for you, and I wish you a lot of fun playing it. However, it's just super important to me that you have a fantastic morning, a great afternoon, and an awesome evening wherever you are in the world. And until next video, fucking cheers.
They want the best of me now, best of me now, best of me now, best of me. They want the best of me now, best of me now, best of me now, best of me. They want the best of me.